The massive space station called Harmony Prime floated in the darkness between star systems. It was built for one purpose: to host meetings between the galaxy's most powerful species when they needed to talk instead of fight. Today, that purpose had never been more important. Ambassador Elena Vasquez looked out through the small window of the human ship called Olive Branch. The station ahead looked like a giant metal flower, with dozens of docking arms reaching out like petals. Ships from across the galaxy were already there, each one bigger and more impressive than her small diplomatic vessel. "We're the last to arrive," said Captain Torres, the ship's commander. His voice carried worry that he tried to hide. Elena nodded. She had gray hair and worn hands that showed her 50 years of life. Her simple blue diplomatic uniform looked plain compared to what the other ambassadors would be wearing. "They wanted it that way," she said. "Makes us look desperate." The war had been going on for 3 years now. It started when humans began settling in star systems that other species claimed belonged to them. What began as small fights over mining, rights and colony locations had grown into something much bigger. Human colonies were being attacked. Human ships were being destroyed. The galaxy's major powers had decided that humanity needed to be put in its place. The Olive Branch docked with a soft bump. Elena straightened her jacket and checked her appearance one last time. Behind her, 6 other humans prepared to represent their entire species in what everyone knew would be surrender talks, disguised as peace negotiations. "Remember," Elena told her team, "we listen more than we speak. We take notes on everything. We stay calm no matter what they say." The airlock opened and they walked into Harmony Prime. The main meeting hall was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds could have formed up there. Representatives from 4 major galactic powers were already seated in sections arranged like a giant circle. Each section was designed for the comfort of different species with different air mixtures, lighting, and temperature controls. The Zephyrians sat in the brightest section. They looked like living crystals, their bodies made of what seemed like colored glass that bent and reflected light in beautiful patterns. Their leader, High Arbiter Zixthala, was 12 feet tall and sparkled like a rainbow when she moved. The Zephyrians controlled more star systems than any other species and had technology that could turn entire planets into crystal gardens. Next to them were the Collective. Elena had to stop herself from staring. The Collective weren't really individual creatures at all. Instead, they were groups of small organisms that worked together like a single mind. Their representative looked like a pile of moving, thinking mud that constantly shifted and changed shape. They spoke with many voices at once, creating an odd harmony that made Elena's skin crawl. The Collective controlled vast regions of space through their ability to work together perfectly. The Kethtar section was darker and filled with the smell of metal and oil. These were the warriors of the galaxy. Each Kethtar stood over 8 feet tall, with 4 muscular arms and thick gray skin covered in natural armor plates. Their leader, War Speaker Gorthak, had scars across his face that he wore like medals. The Kethtar believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe, and they had conquered dozens of worlds to prove it. The strangest section belonged to the Luminari. They weren't really physical beings at all, but pure energy, contained in specially built suits that let them interact with the physical world. Their representative glowed with soft, changing colors, and their voice sounded like music. The Luminari were the oldest species in the galaxy and claimed to understand secrets of the universe that others couldn't even imagine. Finally, there was the small human section. 7 people in simple clothes, sitting in basic chairs, looking like children who had wandered into a meeting of giants. High Arbiter Zixathala's crystalline form brightened as she began to speak. Her voice came through translation devices that turned her crystal song language into words the other species could understand. "We gather today to end the violence that has damaged our galaxy," she said. The light from her body created moving patterns on the walls. "The human species has shown they cannot live peacefully among civilized peoples. They take what is not theirs. They settle where they do not belong. They fight battles they cannot win." The Collective's representative rippled with agreement. When they spoke, it sounded like dozens of people talking at the same time. Young species must learn their place. The galaxy has rules. Humans break these rules. War Speaker Gorthak leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table in front of him. Humans fight like cowards, he growled. They use tricks instead of strength. They hide behind shields instead of facing their enemies with honor. They do not deserve the worlds they claim. The luminary representative's glow shifted to deeper colors. We have watched human behavior for 200 years, they said in their musical voice. They are emotionally unstable. They make decisions based on feelings instead of wisdom. They need guidance from species who have learned to control themselves. Elena listened to all of this without changing expression. She had expected these insults. What surprised her was how coordinated they sounded. The four species had clearly planned this together. High Arbiter Zixthala continued. We offer humanity a generous peace. You will keep 12 star systems in the outer rim of the galaxy. These systems have few resources, but they will be enough for your needs if you learn to live simply. You will abandon all claims to the Kepler Nebula region, added the collective. Your colonies there will be moved to approved locations. We will help with transportation. War Speaker Gorthak's scarred face showed what might have been a smile. Human military forces will be reduced to defensive units only. No ships larger than escort class. No weapons that can threaten civilized worlds. Regular inspections to ensure compliance. The luminary representative concluded. In return, we allow your species to continue existing. This is more mercy than most young species receive when they overstep their boundaries. Elena looked around at her team. Dr. Sarah Chen, their military advisor, was taking notes with a calm expression. Ambassador Rodriguez, who handled trade negotiations, looked thoughtful. The others maintained poker faces that gave nothing away. The terms being offered weren't peace terms. They were surrender conditions designed to keep humanity trapped in a small corner of the galaxy forever. Elena had known this was coming, but hearing it said out loud still made her angry. These are your final terms? Elena asked. They are generous beyond what your species deserves, replied High Arbiter Zixthala. Accept them and live. Reject them and face the consequences of continued war against forces you cannot defeat. Elena nodded slowly. We need time to consider your offer. War Speaker Gorthak laughed, a sound like grinding metal. What is there to consider? You have no choice. Your fleets are outnumbered 10 to 1. Your colonies are defenseless. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Accept reality. Tomorrow, Elena said firmly. We will give you our answer tomorrow. The session ended with the four major powers clearly confident that humanity would surrender. As the various delegations left the meeting hall, Elena heard their quiet conversations. They were already discussing how to divide up human territory and resources. Back in their quarters aboard the Olive Branch, Elena's team gathered around a small table. The room was simple and cramped compared to the luxury suites the other species occupied. Well, said Dr. Chen, that went exactly as we expected. They don't want peace, said Ambassador Rodriguez. They want submission. Elena looked at each of her team members. These weren't just diplomats and advisors. Hidden among them were people the other species would never suspect. Intelligence officers, military planners, and communication specialists who had been preparing for this moment for years. Send the message, Elena said quietly. Dr. Chen activated a small device that looked like a standard tablet. On screens across human space, a simple code phrase appeared. The harvest moon rises. 200 years of preparation was about to pay off. The second day of talks began, with what the galactic powers called their final generous offer. Elena and her team took their seats in the human section while the four major species arranged themselves in their comfortable areas. The morning light from Harmony Prime's artificial sun made the Zephyrian sparkle even more brightly than usual. War Speaker Gorthak stood up first, his massive form casting shadows across the meeting hall. All four of his arms moved as he spoke, making gestures that the translation system turned into words that hurt to hear. Humans will leave the Kepler Nebula systems immediately, he announced. His voice carried the tone of someone giving orders to servants. All colonies, all mining stations, all research facilities. Gone within 30 days. The collective's representative rippled with what might have been pleasure. Human civilians in those systems will be relocated to approved zones. We will provide transport ships. Your belongings will be examined for security purposes. Elena felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her face calm. They were talking about forcing millions of humans from their homes, treating them like criminals being moved to prison camps. High Arbiter Zixthala's crystalline form brightened as she continued the demands. Human military vessels will submit to immediate inspection and modification. Ships too large for your new role will be scrapped. Weapon systems will be removed or downgraded. Your fleets will serve defensive purposes only. The luminary representative glowed with soft, satisfied colors. We have studied human psychology extensively. Your species shows dangerous tendencies toward expansion and aggression. You require supervision from more mature civilizations. Dr. Chen, sitting beside Elena, made careful notes of every word. Her pen moved steadily across the paper, but Elena noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. They had all known this was coming, but it still felt like being slapped. Furthermore, continued the luminary, human research into certain technologies will be restricted. Faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, planetary defense systems, these are beyond your current needs. We will guide your scientific development along safer paths. Ambassador Rodriguez shifted in his chair. Elena knew he was thinking about the human colonies that had spent generations building new lives in the Kepler systems. Families, schools, entire cities would be destroyed by these demands. War Speaker Gorthak wasn't finished. Human trade will be monitored to ensure compliance with galactic law. Your merchant ships will carry observers from civilized species. Your trade agreements will require approval from the Galactic Council. The collective added their harmonic voice to the discussion. Human communications will be subject to review. We must ensure that your species does not spread dangerous ideas or coordinate resistance activities. Elena looked around at the faces surrounding her. The galactic powers weren't just offering peace terms. They were describing the complete end of human independence. They wanted to turn humanity into a pet species, kept alive but controlled in every way that mattered. These terms are non-negotiable. High Arbiter Zixthala concluded. You have caused enough trouble for the galaxy. Accept your limitations and you may continue to exist under our guidance. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to the small human section, waiting for their surrender. Elena stood up slowly. Her simple gray suit looked even plainer next to the elaborate ceremonial clothing and exotic forms around her. She was just one ordinary human woman facing the combined might of 4 galactic superpowers. Honored representatives, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. We came here believing in the possibility of peace between equals. War Speaker Gorthak made a sound that might have been laughter. Equals? Look around you, small human. Count our ships. Measure our territories. Compare our technologies. Where do you see equality? Elena nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right. We don't have your advantages. She paused, looking at each of the alien delegations in turn. We don't control hundreds of star systems like the Zephyrians. We don't have the perfect unity of the collective. We lack the warrior strength of the Kethtar. We don't possess the ancient wisdom of the Luminari. The collective's representative pulsed with satisfaction. Then you understand reality. Submit to guidance from your betters. But we have learned something important during these talks, Elena continued. We learned that you don't want peace. You want surrender. You don't seek cooperation. You demand obedience. High Arbiter Zixthala's form flickered with what might have been impatience. The strong guide the weak. This is the natural order. Your resistance to this truth has caused unnecessary suffering. Elena gestured to her team and they began to stand up. Perhaps you're right about the natural order. Perhaps the strong do guide the weak. She gathered her papers and tucked them into her briefcase. But you've made one critical error in your calculations. The luminary representative's glow shifted to curious colors. What error could that be? Elena turned toward the exit, her team moving with her in perfect coordination. Their movements were calm and deliberate. Like people who had planned this moment carefully, you assumed we were weak, she said without looking back. The human delegation walked toward the doors of the meeting hall while hundreds of alien eyes watched them go. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Wait, called High Arbiter Zixthala. Where are you going? We have not finished our discussion. Elena stopped at the threshold and turned around one last time. Oh, but we have finished. We came here hoping for a real negotiation between peoples who respected each other. Instead, we found bullies making demands of people they consider inferior. War Speaker Gorthak rose to his full imposing height. You cannot simply leave. You have no choice but to accept our terms. Return to your seats immediately. Actually, said Elena with a slight smile, we do have a choice. We choose not to accept your terms. We choose not to recognize your authority over us. We choose to leave. The collective's representative writhed with agitation. You cannot survive without our approval. We control the trade routes. We command the shipping lanes. We decide which species lives and which dies in this galaxy. Dr. Chen spoke for the first time, her voice carrying an odd note of confidence. You control what we let you control. You command what we let you command. You decide what we let you decide. The alien delegates looked confused by this response. They had expected fear, pleading, perhaps desperate last-minute negotiations. They had not expected calm confidence from a species they considered helpless. Elena addressed the hall one final time. For 200 years, we've watched how this galaxy works. We've seen how the strong treat the weak. We've learned your rules. She paused at the doorway. We've also learned that rules only work when everyone agrees to follow them. You are making a terrible mistake, warned the Luminary representative. Resist us and you will face the combined might of 4 galactic superpowers. Your worlds will burn. Your people will suffer. Maybe, Elena agreed. Or maybe you'll discover that you don't know as much about humans as you think you do. The human delegation walked out of Harmony Prime's main hall, leaving behind a chamber full of increasingly angry and confused alien leaders. Within minutes, the olive branch had undocked from the station and was preparing to jump to hyperspace. As the small human ship disappeared into the void, it broadcast a simple message on all diplomatic channels throughout the galaxy. Negotiation period concluded. Prepare for consequences. Back in the meeting hall, the 4 major powers stared at empty chairs where the human delegation had been sitting. For the first time in decades, someone had simply walked away from their demands. High Arbiter Zixthala's crystalline form dimmed with what might have been worry. What just happened? War Speaker Gorthak's scarred face showed confusion instead of his usual confidence. They left. They actually left. The collective's representative shifted nervously. This has never happened before. Lesser species always submit when faced with our combined power. The Luminary delegate glowed with uncertain colors. Perhaps they do not understand the consequences of their defiance. But deep down, each of them felt something they had not experienced in centuries of galactic dominance. Doubt. The humans had walked away as if they held cards that no one else could see. In the hours that followed, urgent messages flew between the homeworlds of the 4 major powers. Military commanders were consulted, intelligence services were activated, battle plans were reviewed, and in the darkness of space, the olive branch jumped toward human territory, carrying news that would change everything. The galaxy's most powerful species had just learned that not everyone was willing to play by their rules. 3 days after the humans walked out of the peace talks, something strange began happening across human space. The galactic powers had expected panic, desperate messages, maybe attempts to restart negotiations. Instead, they witnessed something that made no sense. High Arbiter Zixthala stood in the command center of her crystal ship, watching reports flow in from Zephyrian monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Her crystalline form flickered with confusion as she read the data. The human colonies in the Kepler Nebula are evacuating, reported Captain Veltar, her military advisor. But they're not fleeing in panic. This is organized, planned, efficient. On the main display, streams of data showed human ships moving in perfect coordination. Civilian transports, cargo vessels, and what looked like construction equipment were leaving human colonies and heading toward unknown destinations deeper in human space. How long would it take to organize such a movement? Zixthala asked. For a normal species? Months, perhaps years, Veltar replied. But they're doing it in days, as if they had prepared for this possibility long in advance. Similar confusion was spreading through the other galactic powers. In the hive mind networks of the collective, millions of organisms shared growing concern about human behavior that didn't match their predictions. The collective's primary consciousness gathered data from across their territory. Human trade ships that had been regular visitors to collective worlds were suddenly absent, Human research stations in neutral space had gone dark. Most puzzling, several asteroid mining operations run by humans had simply disappeared, leaving behind empty space where busy industrial facilities had been operating just days before. They are not acting like a defeated species, pulsed the thoughts of the collective. They are acting like a species that planned for this outcome. War Speaker Gorthak was having similar problems understanding human actions. In his fortress, on the Kethtar homeworld, he studied battle reports that made no sense to his warrior mind. "They're destroying their own infrastructure," General Korth reported. "Human colonies they're abandoning, they're not just leaving them empty. They're making sure we can't use anything they built." Gorthak's scarred face twisted into a frown. "Cowards burn what they cannot defend. But this seems different, too organized, too thorough." "There's something else," Korth continued. "Our scouts report massive energy signatures from the abandoned colonies just before they go dark. These aren't random destruction. They're using some kind of systematic demolition process we've never seen before." But it was the luminary who uncovered the most disturbing information. Their energy-based senses could perceive across vast distances, detecting patterns and structures that other species might miss. The luminary representative from the failed peace talks now floated in a special chamber on their homeworld, sharing consciousness with the greater luminary collective intelligence. What they discovered sent ripples of alarm through their entire species. "The humans have been deceiving us," the collective consciousness announced. "What we believed were simple mining operations were actually massive construction projects. What we thought were research stations were manufacturing facilities. What we assumed were exploration ships were conducting detailed surveillance of all our territories. The evidence was overwhelming once they looked for it. Human merchant vessels had been mapping every major trade route, noting military installations, studying defensive patterns. Human scientific expeditions had been testing the response times of various species' fleets, gathering intelligence on military capabilities and strategic weaknesses. Most shocking of all, the Luminari discovered that many star systems they had thought were empty actually contained human facilities that had been carefully hidden from detection. Asteroid fields concealed shipyards, empty planets hosted underground bases. Seemingly barren systems contained industrial complexes that had been operating for decades without anyone noticing. The four galactic powers called an emergency meeting on Harmony Prime, the same station where the peace talks had failed. This time, the mood was very different from their earlier confidence. "How long have they been preparing for this?" High Arbiter Zixthala asked, her crystalline form dim with worry. The collective's representative writhed nervously. "Our analysis suggests since their first contact with galactic civilization, every trade agreement, every cultural exchange, every diplomatic mission, they were gathering intelligence." War Speaker Gorthak slammed one of his 4 fists onto the table. "You mean they've been spying on us for 200 years? While pretending to be weak and helpless?" The luminary delegate's glow flickered with what might have been embarrassment. "It appears that human inexperience in galactic politics was carefully crafted to make us underestimate them. They allowed us to believe we were superior, while they studied our every weakness." Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Navy presented the most damning evidence. "We've analyzed human ship movements over the past decade. They weren't random exploration or simple trade missions. They were conducting the most comprehensive intelligence operation in galactic history." The data painted a picture that none of the galactic powers wanted to believe. The humans had been playing a game that lasted centuries, presenting themselves as naive newcomers while carefully mapping every aspect of galactic civilization. "Look at this," Vextar continued, highlighting sections of a star map. "Human ships have visited every major military installation we operate. They've mapped our supply lines, studied our communication networks, analyzed our strategic capabilities. They know more about our defenses than some of our own commanders do." The collective shared a disturbing realization through their hive mind. The humans never intended to accept our peace terms. They came to the negotiations already knowing they would refuse. The talks were just a way to make us reveal our final positions. War Speaker Gorthak's warrior pride burned with the humiliation of being outmaneuvered. "They made fools of us. While we planned to crush them, they were planning to. What? What could they possibly hope to accomplish? That question was answered when long-range sensors across the galaxy began detecting new energy signatures. Human facilities were coming online, revealing technology and infrastructure that no one had suspected existed. The Zephyrians discovered that several asteroid fields in their territory weren't natural formations but camouflaged human installations. When activated, they revealed manufacturing capabilities that rivaled anything the crystal builders had created. The collective found that human research stations they had dismissed as primitive were actually advanced facilities that had been studying collective biology and hive mind psychology for decades. The humans knew more about how the collective worked than the collective knew about themselves. The Kethtar learned that human exploration vessels had been conducting detailed analyses of Kethtar military tactics, cultural patterns, and psychological weaknesses. Every aspect of Kethtar warrior society had been studied and catalogued. The Luminari made perhaps the most disturbing discovery of all. The humans had somehow developed technology that could hide entire fleets from energy-based detection. Ships and stations that should have been impossible to conceal were scattered throughout the galaxy, invisible to the most advanced sensors the Luminari possessed. They've been building a shadow empire, the Luminari collective consciousness concluded. While we thought we were dealing with a minor species confined to a few dozen worlds, they were actually establishing a presence throughout galactic space. As the scope of human preparation became clear, a new realization dawned on the galactic powers. The species they had planned to contain and control had actually been containing and studying them. High Arbiter Zixthala looked at the tactical displays showing human assets coming online across the galaxy. We need to recalculate everything. Our military assessments, our strategic plans, our assumptions about human capabilities. All of it was based on false information. Information they deliberately fed us, added War Speaker Gorthak, his voice heavy with the weight of being completely outplayed. The collective's representative pulsed with nervous energy. If they have been preparing for this confrontation for 2 centuries, what else don't we know about them? The answer to that question would come sooner than they expected. As human forces began moving from hidden positions throughout the galaxy, the species that everyone had underestimated was about to show exactly what 200 years of patient preparation could accomplish. The young upstarts were about to teach the galaxy's ancient powers a lesson in the art of war. The war began not with massive fleet battles or planetary invasions, but with something far more terrifying to the galactic powers, the realization that their enemies knew exactly how to hurt them. The Zephyrians were the first to understand just how thoroughly the humans had studied them. The great crystal shipyards at Prism 7, the pride of Zephyrian engineering, simply stopped working. No explosions, no visible damage. The massive construction facilities just went silent. High Arbiter Zixthala rushed to the shipyard with her best engineers, desperate to understand what had happened. What they found made no sense according to everything they knew about technology. The resonance frequencies are all wrong, reported Chief Engineer Timura, her crystalline form flickering with confusion. Something is broadcasting a harmonic pattern that disrupts our molecular bonds. The humans had somehow created a weapon that attacked the very foundation of Zephyrian technology. For thousands of years, the crystal builders had used harmonic resonance to grow their ships, their cities, their entire civilization. Now that strength had become a critical weakness. How is this possible? Zixthala demanded. Our resonance patterns are closely guarded secrets. No other species understands crystal harmony well enough to disrupt it. Timara's analysis was devastating. The harmonic weapon shows perfect understanding of our technology. Whoever built it knows our systems better than most Zephyrians do. They've found frequencies we didn't even know existed. Across Zephyrian space, the same pattern repeated. Crystal cities began developing structural problems as human harmonic disruptors interfered with their growth patterns. Communication networks failed as resonance frequencies were jammed. Even their great crystal ships found their hulls becoming unstable when human vessels appeared nearby. The collective faced a different but equally devastating attack. Their greatest strength, the perfect unity of the hive mind, became their worst vulnerability when human cyber warfare specialists introduced what they called logic bombs, into collective communication networks. The attack was subtle at first, small contradictions in data streams, minor inconsistencies in shared thoughts, but the collective's nature meant that every individual organism had to reconcile these contradictions with the greater hive mind. As the false information spread, it created cascading failures in their decision-making process. Collective fleets found themselves paralyzed as millions of organisms received contradictory orders simultaneously. Some ships tried to attack while others attempted to retreat. Some tried to dock while others tried to launch. The perfect coordination that had made the collective unstoppable became chaos that made them helpless. The humans understand our neural patterns. The collective's leadership struggled to communicate as their own thoughts became confused. They've created information viruses designed specifically to attack hive mind psychology. The psychological warfare was even more devastating than the technical attacks. The humans had introduced concepts that the collective couldn't properly process. Ideas about individual identity, personal choice, and independent thought that created confusion in organisms that had never experienced such things. War Speaker Gorthak and the Kethtar faced perhaps the cruelest attack of all. The humans refused to give them the honorable battles they craved. Instead of meeting Kethtar fleets in glorious combat, human forces used tactics that made it impossible for the warrior species to die with honor. They attacked supply lines instead of military targets. They used psychological warfare that exploited Kethtar cultural taboos. They employed weapons and strategies that prevented heroic last stands or noble sacrifices. They fight like cowards, Gorthak raged, but his anger was mixed with growing desperation. They won't face us in honest battle. General Korth brought worse news. It's not cowardice, War Speaker. They've studied our culture so thoroughly that they know exactly how to make our deaths meaningless. Every tactic they use is designed to deny us the honor of dying well. The humans had somehow created weapons that stunned rather than killed, capture devices that took prisoners instead of allowing glorious death in battle, and worst of all, methods of warfare that made Kethtar warriors look foolish rather than brave. For a species that valued honor above life itself, this was torture worse than any physical pain. But the Luminary suffered perhaps the most shocking defeat of all. The ancient energy beings, who had considered themselves beyond physical limitations, found themselves contained and controlled by human technology that should have been impossible. The first Luminary patrol to encounter human forces discovered that their energy forms could be trapped in specially designed force cages. The humans had somehow developed containment fields that worked specifically on energy-based life forms. This technology should not exist. The Luminary collective consciousness struggled to understand. We are pure energy. Physical matter cannot contain us. But the human devices did exactly that. Worse, they seemed to disrupt the harmony frequencies that Luminary used to communicate with each other. For the first time in millions of years, individual Luminary found themselves truly alone, cut off from the collective consciousness that defined their existence. The human weapons didn't just contain them, they forced them to experience individuality, isolation, and mortality in ways their species had long since evolved beyond. It was like forcing gods to become mortal. As the attacks continued, intercepted human communications revealed the true scope of their preparation. Admiral Sarah Chen's voice crackled across compromised channels during a tactical briefing. Phoenix Protocol is now fully active. All deep space assets report ready status. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, we've been planning this longer than some of these species have been spacefaring. The transmission continued with tactical updates that shocked the galactic powers. Zephyrian harmonic disruptors showing 97% effectiveness. Collective neural viruses have paralyzed 60% of their fleets. Kethtar honor denial tactics are working better than projected. Their warriors are surrendering rather than face meaningless deaths. Luminary containment systems are holding steady. But perhaps most disturbing was the casual mention of assets and capabilities that none of the galactic intelligence services had detected. Sleeper facilities in sectors 7 through 14 are coming online ahead of schedule. Hidden fleets report successful deployment from camouflaged bases. Deep cover intelligence operations are providing real-time tactical data. High Arbiter Zix Thala, War Speaker Gorthak, the collective leadership, and the Luminary collective consciousness found themselves facing a terrible truth. They were not fighting a desperate species making a last stand. They were fighting an enemy that had been preparing for this specific war for 2 centuries. The humans hadn't just hidden their true military strength. They had studied each galactic power so thoroughly that they knew exactly how to attack their specific weaknesses. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy was tailored to exploit the unique vulnerabilities of their enemies. How did they do it? Sixathala wondered as another crystal city fell to harmonic disruption. How did a species barely out of their home system outmaneuver civilizations that have existed for millennia? The answer came from captured human communications that revealed the scope of their intelligence network. Human traders, diplomats, researchers, and tourists had been gathering information for 200 years. Every cultural exchange had been a spy mission. Every trade negotiation had been an intelligence operation. Every diplomatic contact had been an opportunity to study potential enemies. The species the galactic powers had dismissed as young, naive, and harmless had been conducting the longest, most comprehensive intelligence operation in galactic history, and now they were using that knowledge to systematically dismantle the military power of 4 galactic superpowers. War Speaker Gorthak, his pride broken by battles he couldn't fight honorably, sent a message to his fellow leaders. We underestimated them completely. They didn't just prepare for war, they prepared for war against us specifically. The storm of human retaliation was just beginning, and already the galaxy's most powerful species were learning what it meant to be truly outmatched. 6 months after the humans walked out of the peace talks, the galaxy looked completely different. The 4 species that had once controlled most of known space now found their territories carved up, their fleets neutralized, and their populations living under a new reality they never could have imagined. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood once again in the great meeting hall of Harmony Prime, but everything had changed. The human section was no longer a small corner with simple chairs. Now it occupied the center of the hall, with comfortable seating and advanced communication equipment. Around the edges, the former galactic powers sat in smaller sections, their once proud delegations reduced and subdued. But the most shocking change was the presence of dozens of other species that had never been allowed in galactic politics before. The Vegan Confederation, the Rigel Collective, the Centauri Alliance, and many others, all species that had been ignored or oppressed by the old powers, now had seats at the table. The Terran Federation formally establishes the new Galactic Compact, Elena announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone whose species had just reshaped the political landscape of the galaxy. This agreement will be based on equality, mutual respect, and the principle that no species has the right to limit another's potential based on age, size, or perceived weakness. High Arbiter Zixthala sat in her reduced section, her crystalline form dim and fractured. The harmonic weapons had not just damaged Zephyrian technology, they had shaken the very foundation of Zephyrian confidence. Her voice when she spoke lacked its former musical beauty. "What are your terms for peace?" she asked. The question that had once been directed at humanity now turned back on its former masters. Elena consulted a holographic display that showed the new galactic map. Human territory now included not just the 12 systems they had been offered as scraps, but vast regions of space that contained some of the galaxy's richest resources and most strategic locations. Full recognition of territorial claims for all current human settlements, Elena began. This includes the Kepler Nebula systems you demanded we abandon, plus the additional territories we've secured during recent negotiations. The collective's representative, now just a small cluster of organisms rather than the massive formation they had once displayed, writhed with what might have been despair. Additional territories? Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on screens throughout the chamber, her uniform displaying the insignia of the new Terran Space Force. During the past 6 months, we've established control over 47 star systems that were previously claimed by various powers. These systems are now under human protection. War Speaker Gorthak, his scarred face showing a new kind of mark, the shame of defeat without honor, asked the question they all feared to hear answered. "And if we refuse these terms?" Chen's smile held no warmth. "You're free to refuse, but you should understand that what you've experienced so far represents approximately 30% of human military capability. We've been building for this possibility for 2 centuries. She gestured to data displays showing military assets across the galaxy. The sleeper facilities you've discovered? They're just the ones we wanted you to find. The hidden fleets you've encountered, a fraction of our actual forces. The weapons that have neutralized your technologies, first-generation systems compared to what we're capable of. The revelation sent shockwaves through the former powers. They had been defeated by what humans considered a limited deployment of their true capabilities. But Chen wasn't finished. More importantly, we've shared our defensive technologies with every species you've oppressed over the centuries. New holographic displays showed the scope of human technology transfer. The Vegan Confederation now possessed shield systems that could protect their worlds from any known weapon. The Rigel Collective had faster-than-light communication networks that bypassed the old powers' control over information. The Centauri Alliance operated manufacturing facilities that could produce ships and equipment at rates that rivaled anything the major powers had achieved. You didn't just face humanity, Elena explained. You faced an alliance of every species that was tired of being told their place by self-appointed galactic masters. The Luminari representative, their energy form flickering with confusion and defeat, asked a question that revealed the depth of their miscalculation. How long have you been planning this transformation of galactic politics? Since our first contact with your civilizations, Elena replied without hesitation. You taught us that might makes right, that the strong determine the fate of the weak. We learned that lesson very well. We just applied it more effectively than you expected. She stood and walked to the center of the hall, addressing not just the former powers but the entire assembly of galactic representatives. You assumed that because we were young we were naive. Because we seemed small we were weak. Because we appeared peaceful we were helpless. You never considered that we might simply be patient. The signing ceremony for the new Galactic Compact took place over 3 days. The former major powers found themselves accepting limitations on territorial expansion, military buildups, and interference in other species' affairs. The same kinds of restrictions they had planned to impose on humanity. But the treaty was more than just a reversal of power. It established new principles for galactic civilization. No species could claim superiority over another based on age or technology. No power could impose its will on weaker neighbors. All species, regardless of size or military strength, would have a voice in galactic affairs. The Zephyrians agreed to share their crystal-growing technology with species that needed better construction methods. The collective would provide their coordination expertise to help other species organize large projects. The Kethtar would serve as peacekeepers, their warrior skills used to protect rather than conquer. The Luminari would share their ancient knowledge freely instead of hoarding it. As the ceremony concluded, High Arbiter Zix Thala approached Elena privately. Her crystalline form was slowly repairing itself, but the damage from the harmonic weapons would take years to fully heal. I must ask, she said, her voice carrying genuine curiosity, rather than the condescension of their first meeting. Was this outcome what you actually wanted? This war, this upheaval, this complete reorganization of galactic society? Elena looked tired suddenly, showing the strain of the past months. We wanted to explore the galaxy in peace. We wanted to grow as a species without artificial limitations. We wanted to live freely without asking permission from self-appointed superiors. She gestured toward the diverse assembly of species now working together. But perhaps this is better. A galaxy where every species has a voice, where progress comes through cooperation rather than domination, where strength is used to protect rather than oppress. And humanity's role in this new order? Elena smiled, and for the first time in months it reached her eyes. The same role we've always played. We'll adapt, we'll learn, we'll explore, and we'll make sure that no one ever again mistakes patience for weakness or preparation for inexperience. As the delegates prepared to return to their home systems, the galaxy began adjusting to its new reality. Trade routes reopened under fair regulations rather than exploitative controls. Research projects became collaborative efforts instead of hoarded secrets. Disputes were settled through negotiation, backed by collective enforcement rather than the whims of the powerful. The species that had dismissed humanity as too young and inexperienced to matter had learned the most important lesson in galactic politics. Never underestimate the quiet ones, because they're often the ones who have been planning the longest. The former powers had spent centuries believing that age brought wisdom, that size meant strength, and that tradition guaranteed superiority. Humanity had proven that intelligence, preparation, and patience could overcome any advantage. The age of human ascendancy hadn't come through conquest or domination, but through the methodical application of humanity's greatest talents, the ability to learn from others, adapt to new situations, and prepare for any possibility no matter how long it took. As the lights dimmed on Harmony Prime and the last delegates departed for their home worlds, the galaxy settled into an era of cooperation that would have been impossible under the old system. The young species had become the teachers, showing ancient civilizations that there was more than one way to be strong. The galaxy had learned to fear human patience. Now it would learn to appreciate human wisdom.